How did you get the nickname Professor Peculiar?
A friend of mine, Steve Banos, coined the term for me.
And what was his reason for doing so?
He just thought I was Professor Peculiar.
Does that peculiar nature play into your persona or your screenwriting at all?
Yes. Well, I mean, the persona part, I guess he saw, was that I seem to be sort of a mild-mannered, professorial type, but actually I'm extremely weird once you get to know me.
Right.
And in the writing, yes, I think peculiar is in my writing.
You're from the Midwest, from
Missouri. Yeah.
And do you think that informs your process at all?
That makes it more peculiar.
Right.
Yeah. You should take a tour of Missouri.
I've been through the Midwest.
Oh, yeah?
No, well, not Missouri. I can't lie.
Yeah, we'll do that one.
Does it still influence your work, or all the years out here kind of like mitigate against it? Does coming from Missouri influence your work at all?
Well, I haven't written any epic farm pictures, so.
Get on that. There's a call for that. Have you ever written with a partner? Have you ever co-written stuff?
A long time ago.
Was it a good process, or did you decide off that you'd rather work alone?
It was a bad process. I decided I wanted to work alone.
How did you meet, the Pad of Guys, if I remember this correctly, that was kind of the first experience I had with like writers being bigger than, in terms of being known, than just like the anonymous, contributor to a process that mostly involved actors by the time you heard of the projects. That was, Shane Black and yourself and a few others. And that I remember, how did you guys get kind of that notoriety or get known by that nickname and kind of step outside or step out from behind the curtain and be more at the forefront of what was going on in Hollywood?
Well, I think two things happened. We met at UCLA, and the Pad was made up of a combination of UCLA students, USC students, and this crowd that sort of moved down from the Bay Area. And notoriety came when people started selling scripts. They started being made into movies, and the news media came in and let's discover the secret of the Pad of Guys, which the secret was we're just a bunch of guys sitting around talking about screenwriting.
Right. Do you think it was a generational thing where you guys were like an injection of fresh blood into what, every generation it gets a little stale and then there's new talent that everyone gets excited about?
Yeah, well, I like to think that.
Right. Do you think you can always make a screenplay better? Do you think that there's always, room in the rewriting or even your own personal revisions where it gets better and better, or is there a point of diminishing returns?
Well, I mean, I think it's really more of that's an existential question. Can you constantly revise a script for the rest of your natural life?
If it makes it better.
You could believe it's making it better. At some point, you must stop writing this script and write another one. So,
how do you know when you're done? Like, how do you know when? Do you ever achieve a level of where like this is exactly what I wanted to say?
Stick a fork in it. That's my Missouri thing.
Right.
It's the Missouri
thing. It slips right in. I don't think that's peculiar at all. I'm not
it is when you stick it into the script. I guess what it is if I've had enough periods of putting it down and coming back to it, there is a final revision. There's just now I got it.
And do you ever get outside opinions from other writers or friends of yours? Does anyone read it before you have to turn it in just to double check yourself?
Yes, one person. My wife, Yelda Turanian, who was a studio executive for many years.
Former colleague of mine.
Ah, great. And she's brilliant at seeing what works and what doesn't, whether it's small details or broad strokes. So she's really my creative partner that way.
Are you able to work on multiple projects at the same time? Do you work?
Yes. Yes.
Is that like an upscale problem, having a lot of projects in development, or do you like to focus on one movie at a time? Or is it just kind of like a necessary evil that you might end up with a few projects around town and they all have to work?
I think it's something that just more or less happens, especially when you're receptive to the idea of ladling more work on yourself.
Right.
But so the way to do it is quickly, basically, and make progress with each one and switch off between them.
Do you find that Fight Club was made at a time where the studio seemed more risk-friendly, or was that just the nature of the personalities at that studio at that time?
Well, at that level, at that budgetary level, yeah, that was more of a risk-taking period, I think.
Right.
I don't know how long it lasted or what it included entirely, but it doesn't feel that way now,
Right.
I don't think.
You find it's a little more constricting?
Yeah.
Do your own personal taste run towards things in that genre or things that are that edgy?
Yes, I mean, I like all kinds of genres, but I like commonality in that the characters have something wrong with them that's interesting and provocative. And I like to also stretch the boundaries of a given
Right.
genre and layer in as much interesting material as I can.
Right. To pursue that kind of like ambition in terms of your own work, do you find yourself focusing on spec work or coming up with original screenplays that you'll take to the studio? Or do you look for assignments from the studios to be brought to you to kind of continue in that vein?
Well, I've largely been doing assignments, and the assignments have had something a little bit off the mainstream
Right.
track about what a studio normally
Right.
develops.
I imagine after Fight Club, you get a lot of like, let's go get the Fight Club guy. We have anything that's like a little off the beaten track, get that Fight Club guy. So has it been a lot of those?
Well, yeah, but it's attracted, it's brought projects to me that I found to be interesting. So
Is it easier or not, or the same to write an original than to do an adaptation or do rewriting?
well, I mean, like I was saying before, the end result and the amount of work in an original and an adaptation is the same.
Right.
You must make a screenplay.
Right.
So the work is there. If you have an original idea, that helps you come up with an original script.
I've heard that. How many screenplays do you think you've written over the years since you started?
I started probably 20, I guess. Yeah, 11 of them as studio assignments.
And do you find that writing that many screenplays helps revise kind of your own skill set and your process? Do you feel like the last script you turned in is better than the first script you ever wrote?
I don't think necessarily that each one is
Right.
just better than the other one, but you know, there's two things that happen over time: a good one and a bad one. The good one is that you hopefully merge this analytical and intuitive side together better, and you get that mojo working.
Right.
The bad thing is falling into the same solutions, tricks, and character patterns, story patterns. So it's good every once in a while to really try something experimental and try to surprise yourself.
Now, when you say assignments, are they coming to you with homegrown ideas or other people's screenplays that you've rewritten? Mostly.
I haven't done much rewriting of other screenplays. It's usually a book,
Okay.
sometimes a magazine article or something.
Do you know at this point in your career what the best thing you've ever written is?
Well, I probably know, but I'm not going to tell you because
And it hasn't been produced, and if not, do you need a producer?
because I have so many of what I've done that I'm still making progress and pushing forward.
Right. And these are
That
things
I don't
of
want
your-
this to get out there and somebody goes, oh, so the one I'm pushing forward
Right.
is not his favorite.
He sits on the best stuff. So these are things that are kind of your ideas that you control.
No, even the studio projects, I'm still,
You're still hoarding
finding
them.
ways
Right.
to get them moving inside the studio. So,
So we won't play favorites.
right.
Okay. Where do you find the majority of your inspiration? Like what kind of moves you to go write every day,
I don't have an answer.
besides the money?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
You've never like you said analytical and
Well, the worst thing you do is try to analyze how you get inspiration because
Right.
then you're not going to get any.
I'll put it a
It's-
different way. Are you inspired by the world around you, current events, literature, like
I think that all meshes into some
Right.
kind of chemical mixture
Just a
of
big
fact
stew.
and fiction, and then something pops out as a story
Right.
idea. Yeah.
So the process, the muscle you kind of use to write the screenplays, you never turn that on yourself or try to analyze your own process because that would ruin the mojo.
Yeah.
We're not going to make you do it today. Do you read a lot of other people's screenplays just to see what the town is kind of buying or
No, you know, I had been doing that a while back, more out of wanting to read the screenplay and
Right.
get excited about it. But then I find that it just ruins the movie-going experience. So I've been trying to read them after I see the film.
Okay. Do you still love going to movies?
Absolutely. And it helps not having read the script.
Right.
So I can go in and watch the movie and
Right.
enjoy it.
One of the bad things about being a studio executive is when we all read a script to bid on it or when we try to buy something, it usually means, sometimes not, but usually it means we're all excited about it. Sixth Sense went out as a spec, and that was a really fun read because it read just the way the movie played. You didn't really see the twist coming, and it was very enjoyable, entertaining. But then, having read it, you go to the theater and you're just like, oh, this is so boring. Not because it's not a great movie, but I know everything about it. Does it take any special approach to read a screenplay to really appreciate the craft? Do you think you have to know about how they're crafted?
Not in the beginning. I think if you just go and just
Right.
start soaking it in, and then maybe start reading books on screenwriting or taking some seminars or classes to start to get into the analytical part of it. But I think you should just start reading.
Do you have any favorites that you can recall that really worked for you on the page? Other people's work, that have stayed with you?
Yeah, Pulp Fiction, being John Malkovich. I guess earlier than that, the original Lethal Weapon, Shane's. And then there's screenplays like William Goldman's Butch Cassidy, or you go back to Billy Wilder's screenplays. Sunset Boulevard is an incredible read.
Now, do you, you named adaptation and Pulp Fiction. Do you appreciate that kind of playing with traditional structure? I mean, you certainly did it with Fight Club, but is that something you'd like to do more of or see more of it done?
Yes, definitely.
Do you think we're locked in? Like, I think sometimes people are locked into traditional structures, and you really almost need to do something like that or do something like Fight Club just to wake people up out of their, what they expect to see coming out of the pike.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily always good to underestimate the audience, despite what P.T. Barnum and many studio execs have thought, but not including yourself.
Thank you very much for that disclaimer. We run that disclaimer at the beginning of every interview, by the way. It's great that the studio was a willing partner on Fight Club in terms of not shying away from the type of material, but just in terms of your collaboration with David Fincher, facing material that's that kind of original or problematic for a traditional adaptation. How did you guys find your rhythm, or what was it like kind of arriving at the methodology to get that book to the screen?
Well, there was a period before Fincher. We had an initial meeting and with the producers, and we sort of talked about what we thought the first draft should be, and then he went off to shoot a film. So it was sort of
left alone
to write the first draft. I finished my own rough first draft of the script and looked at it and said, this will kill the project if I turn this in.
Kill it why? Like what do you think was...
It comes in, they read it, and they go, oh, it wasn't really something you could adapt from a book. And it's all over.
What was it about that first draft that you felt would play that way?
I might have made the mistake of trying to do some things too faithful to the book and making them too enigmatic or using too much narrative to try to tell too much. And somehow structurally it wasn't all working. So I went back, and that's when I tried to free myself from the book a little bit more. And I remember that David had said the narration should not help the audience. It should be its own disembodied thing, which I was doing to some degree, but I was still using it too much. So then I just changed it all to commentary that either did not move the story forward, but moved the character forward, or contradicted what you're seeing. And then I started to really look for internal logic. What really moves this from one point to another? And I got a rough draft and turned it in, and it hadn't gotten to Fincher yet, but Laura Ziskin said, this is fantastic, we're going on with this. And then Fincher got it, and he had an extremely positive reaction, called me from the set. And then the strangest thing happened, which is he still had to finish filming and do post. So Fox 2000 actually had to say, you're stopping after the first draft, and we're suspending the work. And then they threw another project at me, which actually I wanted to do.
Was it hard to get your head out of Fight Club, go into your new project, and then go back to Fight Club?
At first it was because I was really excited about that first draft. But then they wanted me to do this adaptation of a book called Last Train to Memphis, which is about the young part of Elvis Presley's life. And the book is just a 600-page encyclopedic sort of biography, which has got great detail in it, but there's no story per se. So I wound up being able to write my own original script about Elvis Presley. And it was for Mike Newell at the time, and he was great to work with. And then, so that got my mind off of it. And then Fincher was done, came back, and we had our first work section to get to work on the second draft. And basically at that point, David wasn't concerned about, what's a studio movie? What do we have to pull back from? It was just, we're going to do it. And he had a lot of ideas about how to rearrange the story and do other things. And so we got to work into the second draft process. And Art Linson would say, I don't know if this is ever going to be, I don't know. I look into Bill Mechanic's eyes and there's something a little bit, he's not, he's not totally getting this. And so he would be saying that actually while David's still going on absolutely 100%, his artistic vision of what it should be.
Now, was that what you wanted to hear from a producer at that point, or was that unnerving?
I think the timing was a little strange in a creative meeting, but also Art was really making sure we understood that this thing's really on the chopping block all the time. Which thankfully didn't scare Fincher at all. So we proceeded down a path that was, artistically driven. And then I guess eventually Bill Mechanic says, if you get Brad Pitt to be in this film, I'll give you the budget you're talking about. I actually don't know what that budget was, but I imagine it was the kind of budget where you would have to get Brad Pitt in the film to make it. So it happened. So that's how it became a movie that a studio would greenlight at that budget with that cast, with that subject matter. But it was always a concern. Certainly Art Linson's concern.
I mean, as the film's writer, what was it like stepping on the set and seeing what you had pictured in your head, kind of being, shot by a director like David and being acted by Edward Norton and Brad Pitt? Was it close to what you had in your mind?
Yeah, it was really, that was one of the most uplifting things is, first of all, I already thought the casting was that. So I was already thinking that way. And then seeing them on the set and seeing how Brad Pitt was so much like Tyler Durden, and Edward Norton walks around looking like he thinks that about the world all the time. So it was perfect. By the way, I have to add something about Bill Mechanic. Ultimately, I think he was very ballsy to greenlight the film anyway. So I do have to give him his full due for that.
Did you guys have to go through a whole test screening process for that movie, or did they recognize that it's an adult movie? It's not the kind of movie you can, put a pencil in people's hands and go, how would you rate this movie? Did you have to go through that process anyway?
I'm not aware of any test screenings. I don't remember hearing about it. What I do remember was the first rough cut, and all sorts of people were there. I mean, not just producers and studio people and the cast and us. There were agents too. And I think Brian Lord walked out and was just like, wow, I don't know what's going to happen with this, but this is the wildest thing I've ever seen. But I thought at that time, boy, I just don't know how this is going to do. I love it, but I don't know how it's going to do.
We had a similar anxiety over Seven at New Line because it was, David Fincher and Brad Pitt's previous collaboration, and that movie we did test screen, and that thing, when the lights came up and we stuck pencils in people's hands and said, like, how would you rate this movie? They were so disturbed by the whole experience that there was almost a mutiny, and the scores reflected it. But then we did this thing where I think they did this on Silence of the Lambs. We called people back 3 days later after the movie sunk in, for the people that gave their phone numbers, and the scores went much higher because it's a different experience upon reflection than it is like right when the lights come up.
Oh yeah, we did call people back after
Right.
Fight Club, and they said, "Don't ever call me here again."
Lose my
Slammed
number.
down the phone.
Right. In terms of the success you feel for Fight Club, the day before principal photography, you feel a certain way. That's been the majority of your experience. The film gets shot. It's an incredibly positive experience. It comes out, and now it belongs to the world. It's had this incredible life after its release. Has that changed your perspective on how you judge your own success with it?
Well, I put it this way: the process of working on it, from starting on the script, and then when it started shooting, and then seeing the finished product, was totally validating. From an artistic perspective. Well, I did actually have to experience the phase of it not being that much of a success. And I had to examine the feelings, like, what does that make me feel about it?
Right.
And I still retain the feeling that this was great to work on. I think we all did great work, and I'm proud of it. The subsequent life of it on DVD has been very gratifying.
So your feelings about it, the pride you feel, is there, whether it had become this, now this institution, this, one of the classic films of the 90s, it would be there anyway?
Yes. Yes, I believe so.
During the writing of it or the crafting of it, did you ever suffer kind of a roadblock or any type of writer's block in just the crafting of it, or have you ever experienced that?
Oh yeah. That happens a lot, either before I start something, which is really in a way kind of worse, because there's nothing that you're blocked from that you need to get back to.
Right.
You're blocked and you're not starting something. But in either case, what I try to do is my experiments, like my interviews with the characters. I also find that if it's an idea and I pretty much know the idea, but I feel really blocked about how to shape it, I start thinking about, well, what are some key scenes that I feel like would be in this project, whether it's the climax or some other part of the film, and I try to write those scenes first out of order. And what happens is, I call it the scent of blood. What happens is you are in it now, and you didn't start on fade in,
Right.
but you're in the script, and it can kind of grow out from inside instead of page one.
Right.
And I found it to be very effective to get through blocked period.
So like jumping to the meat of something can kind of like jumpstart your process, and it frees you of having to go kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the traditional approach to writing a story.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
would your prescription for kind of writers who get stuck be that, as well as just kind of keep writing and get through it and not, dwell on the block too much?
I find a lot of blocks happen sequentially while you're going in linear fashion, and you just can't figure out what the connective tissue or the transition is at this part of the story. I say, skip it.
Right.
Go over to this part where you really have some feeling and write that. And I think that's a good way of staying in it.
Oh, that's great. We have our own suggestion of potentially how to help writers get past certain blocks, and we call it the screenwriting exercise. And here's how it works. I'm going to call out my associate, Norris, and he's going to bring over your object. Norris, this is the tray that contains your object.
I see.
Your object, sir.
Thank you.
And the way this is going to work is you're going to tell me its story, and then you're going to tell me why you chose that story.
And afterwards, I get to have it?
If you're a good boy, and we like the story.
Well, what this reminds me of is, it's funny you would pick this. In fact, did anyone know anything about my life history when they...
Just Missouri and that you're peculiar.
Oh. Well, I had a cat that I was very close to when I was a child. And it played with this, there was this saw in the garage, an electric saw, and it started pulling on the cord, and the whole saw came on somehow, and it fell on the cat and sliced it up into, raw meat right there in front of me. It was pretty traumatic.
And we're bringing you right back there.
Yeah, it's, I just find it hard to believe that you'd actually bring out something that was, so similar looking even to the way the saw, sliced into it. But actually, the cat wasn't my favorite cat. It was my brother's favorite cat. You see, my older brother, the cat just constantly followed him around, and even if he ignored the cat, this cat would just purr and jump onto his lap, and if he shoved it off his lap, it would just sit on the floor and look up and purr, and the cat wouldn't have anything to do with me.
That saw didn't really fall off the shelf, did it?
Well, what I was going to say was there was kind of a strange accident. I got a little bit resentful of the cat ignoring me all the time and loving my brother. So what I did was, those 9-volt batteries that have both the negative and positive post on top?
You bet.
I stuck it on the cat's tongue, which gives it the electrical charge. And it was really funny. It was at the time.
Right, you had to be there.
Well, yeah. And I wouldn't think something like that's funny now.
I find it funny, but I'm not a pet person.
Yeah. No, as a kid, of course, I thought it was funny. And so it bit me. Now, I don't know if you've ever had a cat bite you.
I haven't actually.
It's not like scratching. They bite. They just bite a big hunk of skin right out of my, just.
Right.
Well, it feels like they bit a hunk of skin out. It's a bad wound. It heals, but it's.
Yeah, that looks like it's pretty held up.
Well, anyway, it felt like a big hunk was bit out.
Right.
And I got upset, and it was an impulsive thing. It was just in the moment, and I yanked the cord of the saw, like to make it just crash near the cat and scare it, and it turned on and it fell on the cat.
Okay, so you look at a steak, and you come up with this harrowing story of animal cruelty and sibling rage. How did you get there?
Well, it actually happened.
Oh, it's an actual total recall sense memory thing.
Yeah, in fact, okay, I took the saw. I took the saw and I cut the cat.
Was there even a cat? Or was it just
I cut the cat up. Now, here's the better part of the story. I took it and ran outside the back door. No one could see me. Went into the street and then ran up to our front door, banging on it, putting on, weeping and everything. A hit-and-run driver killed our cat, and the family kind of recovered, and we buried it in the backyard.
And what did your brother think?
Well, he didn't care. He never cared about that cat. He was sick. Even at the funeral, I was feeling sad and guilty, but he didn't have any feelings. And then we had this sort of post that the cat could climb up and hang out in. The next morning, the cat was in it. Now, we'd buried the cat. It was washed, clean, and dry. And it turns out our neighbor's dog had dug it up the night before. And the neighbors were so horrified, they washed the cat, used a blow dryer on it, and tried to just stick it back in like, maybe it died of natural causes.
Well, what are the odds that we wanted a story and you just went through memory lane for us?
There are no odds. It's completely made up.
Now, what was it, free association, or did
Yeah.
you? And why the violence? Was it the raw meat aspect of it?
You bring out raw, bloody meat and set it in front of me.
Right.
I wasn't going to talk about barbecuing the whole time, so I just thought of meat and slicing and blood, and not only that, but I think that's kind of fun stuff to talk about.
Right.
Really,
So I gather you don't have pets.
Currently, I do. Yeah. I have a dog that loves me unconditionally.
Right. Right. Lucky dog.